Let's talk about how to start a podcast people will listen to. And let me first talk to you. But before you start a podcast, there are a few things you need to really pay attention to. So what is a podcast real quick? So from a technical perspective, a podcast is simply a group of digital audio files available to others via the internet or podcast platforms. So what you're listening to me right now, this is a podcast, okay? And so the main topics of podcasts can vary, and so can the number of people involved. People can individually start a podcast of their own and eventually expand out to other hosts and various topics. The key to a podcast is that it is consistent with new content and with the overall topics. So these topics can really be anything from interviews to discussing what occurred on the news, becoming a storyteller, or simply having an opinion on a matter. And podcasts have become so popular because of how simple they are to consume. They help pass the time for those who need to commute or listen to a topic they are interested in, and it can all be done simply from their mobile phones. That's just fantastic. And there are many reasons to start a podcast. You can build an audience, you can increase the size and value of your network, you can make money, you can position yourself as an authority in your industry, you can grow your personal brand, for instance. You can actually help with your digital marketing strategy. So you have a lot of ways, a lot of value, a lot of reasons why you want to start a podcast. And podcasts are different from blogs versus YouTube or webcasting, totally different. Podcasting is also different from blogging because podcasting, the reality here is that you have the importance of the video and audio, something you don't have in blogging. What about podcasting versus YouTube? Well, podcasting has, like on YouTube, you can do podcasting now, but if you are doing podcasting, you have the ability to do just a regular podcast, or you can do a video podcast also. So what I'm trying to say here is that you need to actually think about the format of podcast you want to have, and that's why you want to understand your target audience. You need to understand what kind of audience you have and what kind of content they are willing to consume, right? Because if you don't have the listeners, your podcast is not going to grow, and you are going to be there. You're going to sit there lethargically and not grow, and that's not something that you want. So have a clear idea about your topic, have a clear idea about your listener persona before you start. By the way, boss, welcome back to the show. It's really a pleasure to have you here. We're going to have a quick convo about how to start a podcast people will listen to. The second thing you need to do here is planning. So planning is really important. So when we talk about planning, we're speaking about a lot of things. For example, first of all, you need to think about the niche or topic. Okay, think about the exact niche for you. So what kind of a topic are you knowledgeable in? You don't just choose a niche because you love the niche or because it is popular. The question is, are you knowledgeable in the field? Do you have acumen? Do you have expertise in the field? If you do, fantastic. And it's not just about having expertise though. You have to be passionate about talking about that niche. Because remember, podcasts are very long. You can have a podcast for 20 minutes. I mean, very long if you compare them to TikTok or YouTube Shorts, right? I mean, you have podcasts that last for 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 1 hour, whatever. So for you to have a conversation about a topic that you're not interested in, that will be very brutal. So choose the topic you're interested in. You also need to think about your motivation and goals. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this whole podcast thing? Answer me. So what you need to have a clear idea of what's really motivating you. Are you trying to share knowledge? Are you trying to make money? Are you trying to grow a community? Are you trying to actually to parlay your expertise in podcasting as a multi-million-dollar bookseller? I mean, those are important elements that you need to think about. Think about your audience. Think about the kind of research you have to put into the work every single week. Because see, a podcast is not a short-term thing. It is not a sprint. It is a marathon. So you got to really pay attention to what kind of research you have to go in, like day in and day out, and what kind of work you need to pay attention to. Also, think about the format, the show format. Do you want to go through? Do you want to be a co-host? You want to go solo? You want to do an interview format? You want to do a vlog? You have to think about all those things. Think about the show length and think about the publishing frequency, because see, those things are important. See, publishing frequency will help you, will establish consistency. This will help you add an extra layer of credibility, because if your audience sees that you have a new episode come every week, that consistency will help you grow faster than if you have like an erratic sort of publishing schedule. Like we publish this month, and then you publish 3 months afterwards. Like nothing is really sure. You're not going to grow. So very important. You want to be clear about. You want to have a frequent publishing schedule. You want to actually adhere to some branding. You need to have some branding. You need to be consistent. You need to have you need to make your podcast creative, innovative, and so on and so forth. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We're having a conversation about how to start a podcast people will listen to. The third thing I want you to pay attention to when it comes to podcasting, you got to really think about branding and marketing. I just spoke about that, but I wanted to go a little granular here. Why branding and marketing is really important? Because that's the first impression that you have. That's the first impression. So when we talk about branding and marketing, we're speaking about you actually creating your brand and image. So you need to set the right tone and you need to keep it uniform. Okay. So we're talking about keeping things uniform, not only on your webpage, if you have a webpage, on your landing page, if you have a landing page, on all the social media platforms where you are located. So if you are on Facebook, I want to see the same color. I want to see the same tone. If you are on Instagram, same thing. If you are on YouTube, I want to see the same thing. Now, this same sort of branding tone, I want to see it also on the in the podcast directories, right? So when you go on Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts or Google Podcasts or iHeartRadio or Amazon Music, you have to be consistent, right? And when we talk about consistency, we're speaking about a series of things. Your cover art should actually be in sync with your logo. And basically when we talk about you actually having some branding, also you want to record an intro or get one professionally done when you start a podcast. And so you want to also have an intro and outro music. So now intro and outro music, make sure that those sounds are free of copyright infringement. In other words, they are copyright free. You want to also have maybe a video template. This could help you establish some level of credibility here. And you can also have some social media post templates, and you can also have website post templates. The bottom line I'm trying to have here is that when I talk about templates, I'm talking about anytime you have a new episode and you need to actually cross-publish your new episodes on social media, on different social medias, having the templates can help. And if you are going to do the same thing on your websites, it can really help to have a template already. Because there are some podcast hosts, what they do is when they actually issue a new podcast, they actually transcribe the podcast into written form and they actually post it as an article on their website. So you can have it too, but you need to have a template. If you want to start a podcast people will listen to, you got to pay attention to your recording equipment. This is so important. So when we talk about recording equipment, we're talking about your microphone. You need to have a microphone. You need to have a decent pair of headphones. You need to have a laptop or desktop for recording software. Now I'm talking to you here. I have those three things. Okay. And it's really important to understand that and it doesn't matter whether you are a beginner or you are a professional or you are a semi-professional. The bottom line is you can start with a microphone, pair of headphones, and recording software. Now, if you have the budget, if you are, let's say, a semi-professional, or if you are a professional, you can even include some, like a camera in the whole mix, right? So that way you are able to do not only just a regular podcast, but you can also have a video podcast. But when you start, don't try to kill yourself with some expensive stuff or whatever. You don't need that. You really don't need to have anything expensive. Okay. So you want to actually gradually scale your equipment. And this is based on your success. And one thing I want to say also is that when you think about those three things that I spoke to you about, also think about your mic accessories. Consider purchasing an arm for your microphone to avoid the recording picking up vibrations. A pop filter can also help with the air hitting the microphones and creating unwanted noises. If you are considering a camera for your video podcasting, you can actually, we have another video about how to actually choose the best video podcasting equipment. And this is really cool. And also you might want to think about mixers and interfaces, but this is optional though. So the thing is that this helps with getting that crisp sound in the end and will be used by serious podcasters. There are many options out there, but one of the most popular and easy one to use is the Focusrite Scarlett. You only need one if you pick an XLR microphone and it plugs in between the microphone and the computer for better signal tweaking. You can also think about the best podcast headphones, okay? And think also about soundproofing. So echoes and background noises are hard to remove in post-production, so they normally come at the cost of quality. So make sure to pick a room with high ceilings, away from noises like busy roads or buzzing electrics. You will want to lay down a carpet on the floor to help with the sound bouncing off. Anything you can add to the room that will absorb the sound will really help, like duvets or blankets, like thick curtains and pillows. If you want to up your game, you can soundproof your room, and this comes in all shapes and budgets, okay? You can professionally treat a room, of course, but sometimes just spending a couple of $100 on foam wall panels for sound insulation will go a long way. Also, think about recording and editing software. Also, this will help you a lot in terms of having the right quality. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We're having a conversation about how to start a podcast people will listen to. What you want to do next is to record your first episode. If you don't start, you will never know what will really happen. So you want to actually plan 3 episodes or 3 to 5 episodes in advance. Don't do one. You want to get in the game. You want to have some kind of a momentum happening there. Okay, you want to write a script and you want to come up with episodes titles for when you start a podcast. Now, the thing here is that your episode titles are really important, and you also need to have descriptions. Your podcast description is also important. Why? Because those are part of what we call the metadata of your podcast, and that metadata is important because it will be fed into search engines. So Google will actually have access to it. It will be fed also into the search engines on podcast directories such as Apple Podcast and Spotify Podcast. Okay. And also think about whether you want to have podcast guests. So if you want to think about podcast guests, then now is the time to start researching those guests. That way, when you're ready to have your podcast go live, you will have the guests ready. It takes time to find and book those guests though, because they have to be available too. And then you have to record. You have to record your podcast. So you have to record, make sure that you are in the best element. You have to actually make sure that your voice is on point. You have to be inspired. You have to do some research. Okay. If you have to write notes, whatever you have to be in order to be available on D-Day, mentally, physically, spiritually. If you believe in those things, do it. The bottom line is you need to be ready on that D-Day. And also you want to think about editing your episodes. Okay. You need to remove things like and filler words. Okay. Or, like those things, you want to also remove parts that don't add value or go on tangents. And so what you want to do also is that you need to think about the best way to automate the whole things. Because if you're going to do this for 1,000 podcasts, you need to have a system in place that system should allow you to get things done real quick. So your podcast, like your recording to production time frame, should be really short. Now, when you start, you will have a lot of trials and errors, so it might take you a while to actually get the ball rolling. But once you are ready to go, you should be going a lot faster. The next thing you want to do here is to launch, right? So now, before you launch, you need to host your podcast. So you can host your podcast on platforms such as Podbean, Libsyn, Buzzsprout, or Anchor/Spotify. And the thing here is that you need to have those because before you actually submit your podcast to directories such as Apple Podcast and Spotify Podcast, you need to host those first, and that's where you need to upload your episode files. And so you need to understand when you upload your file, it's just as easy as adding a new episode and selecting the file. So you want to add a description of the episode as well as, or you can actually add show notes, and you want to select the date and time you want the show to go live. Remember that you want to launch with 3 episodes. You can leave them in draft until you are ready to publish all of them at the same time. And you can submit your episode to directories. So I spoke to you about Spotify, Anchor, Podbean. You have Acast, SoundCloud. You have Apple Podcasts. This is really good. And you can also list your podcast on your website. This is optional, but it really works like crazy. It works really well. You can also try social media channels for when you start a podcast. For example, you can create a special Facebook group, or you can create a special Facebook page to sort of talk about your podcast. This works fantastically as well. You can have a virtual launch party. So, if you're launching your podcast, you can have a virtual launch party, or you can have a real party, by the way. And you can have email marketing for day ones. So basically what you do here is that you want to actually collect emails throughout the year, so that when you're ready, you just blast your folks on your list with the info that you want to share, that you're just starting a podcast, right? It's really a big thing, though. Don't underestimate it. It's really a big thing to start a podcast. It takes time, it takes dedication, it takes commitment, it takes consistency to actually see things through. And as we always say, to all our business clients, it ain't going to happen overnight. It's not a sprint, it is a marathon. So pace yourself. You want to pace yourself. And one thing you also want to do here is you need to design a system to post your episodes to your website if you do have a website. And so there are plugins that help with embedding the episodes into your post as a podcast player as well. So this is kind of cool. Now let's talk about promotion and growth. Okay, let's say you have your podcast, and so you hit the publish button on all 3 to 5 episodes. And so you post the 3 episodes on your website or whatever. So you send your newsletter to let everyone know. Now what? It's time to put on some efforts in terms of promoting your podcast. Remember, nobody knows you. Nobody knows you, and you're going to have to work harder to actually be known. Of course, you have talent. Otherwise, you won't do it. You have dedication. You have courage. Yes, but those things are not sufficient. You need to do more. So you can actually think about promoting your show on social media. Yeah, works like fantastic. You can try to really promote your show on your website. Yes, you can actually work with others in the industry to do cross promotion when you start a podcast. Yeah, so they promote your podcast, you promote theirs, right? You can also make sure that you are listening and acting on feedback. So when people give you feedback, you have to be very humble to say, okay, you know what? I didn't see this way. I'm going to change things. So this will help you a lot. And also think about getting feedback from your audience. So there are a lot of ways to get feedback from the audience, but one of the best ways in our view is to actually get reviews from Apple Podcasts on the Apple Podcasts. So people will download your podcast, and then they will provide feedback based on what they like, what they didn't like. And so don't take those pieces of feedback personally. It's about your podcast, okay? And you can also go through an episode of a self-feedback scenario. So you got to ask yourself whether you're giving it all, like whether you're doing your best, right? Because sometimes we all know, even if you're telling yourself, hey, listen, I'm doing good, whatever, we all know deep inside whether you are doing good or not. Also, think about monetizing. So you can monetize through several ways. You can monetize through sponsored ads or episodes, through affiliate links or codes, through coaching or consulting. You can have a paid content or memberships. You can have merchandise. You can accept donations or tips. There are a lot of platforms such as PayPal and Patreon where you can actually accept donations and tips. You can even monetize by doing a crowdfunding campaign, by actually launching a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo or on Kickstarter, or you can even do so through Gumroad, and so they will actually help you monetize your content, which you need anyway. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. Let's quickly do a recap here. So I was just talking to you about how to start a podcast people will listen to. So I talked about before you start a podcast, the planning phase, branding and marketing, recording equipment, recording and editing software. That you have to record your first episodes, editing your episodes, launching, promotion and growth, and monetization. Thank you. God bless you. I'll speak to you another time. But until then, remember, stay marvelous.